Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at onpurposely.com.
The last time you and I met, our friend Peter was weeping bitterly. Have you ever cried bitter tears? Have you ever been in that place? But Peter didn't stay there. Today, his story turns around. On the Bible for Busy People, I'm Erica, your host, and it is a joy to be with you today as you and I remember the greatest act of love in the history of humanity, the day Jesus died for my sins and your sins. You and I have been studying the darkest night in history, the night Jesus was arrested, put on trial, and ultimately sentenced to death for crimes he did not commit. He went to the cross because of the crimes I committed and the ones you committed. He took our place on that cross. Today, we pick up the story in Luke's Gospel, chapter 23, verse 32. Two others, both criminals, were led out to be executed with him. When they came to a place called the Skull, they nailed him to the cross. And the criminals were also crucified, one on his right and one on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing." And the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. The crowd watched, and the leaders scoffed. "He saved others." They said, "Let him save himself if he is really God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers mocked him too by offering him a drink of sour wine. They called out to him, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." A sign was fastened above him with these three words, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging beside him scoffed, "So you're the Messiah, are you? Prove it by saving yourself and us too while you're at it." But the other criminal protested, "Don't you fear God? Even when you have been sentenced to die, we deserve to die for our crimes, but this man hasn't done anything wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise." By this time, it was about noon, and darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. The light from the sun was gone. And suddenly the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn down the middle. Then Jesus shouted, "Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands." And with those words, he breathed his last. When the Roman officer overseeing the execution saw what had happened, he worshiped God. This is a Roman officer, and said, "Surely this man was innocent." And when all the crowd that came to see the crucifixion saw what had happened, they went home in deep sorrow. But Jesus' friends, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance watching. I want to let you know right now that if you are standing at a distance, if you are watching other Christians and wondering if you are good enough to follow Christ, I want you to know you're not. I'm not. No one is. This is the reason we are studying this story today. The reason you and I are remembering what Jesus did on the cross. He did the work for us. The thief on the cross who reached out to him had no time to do one good deed, only to turn and to believe. Jesus asks for your belief. He wants to forgive you of your sins. You need only ask. Receive his forgiveness and receive his love. It will be the best decision you ever make in your life. Your life will not be perfect, but he will be by your side. And one day, your life will be perfect in heaven, and you'll get to be with him forever. All right, our story is about to turn. Will you join me now? In John chapter 20, verse 1, one of my favorite sentences in the English language. Early on Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. She ran and found Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. She said, "They have taken the Lord's body out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." Peter and the other disciple started out for the tomb. They were both running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He stooped and looked in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he didn't go in. Now, this is John referring to himself. He is the author of the Gospel of John. Then I want you to notice the difference. Simon Peter arrived and went inside. That had to be terrifying, right? John looked in, Peter walked in. He loved Jesus so much. And I believe, I'm not a theologian, but I believe everything in his big, passionate heart was telling him, Jesus is alive. Continuing in verse 6 now, he also noticed the linen wrappings lying there, while the cloth that had covered Jesus' head was folded up and lying apart from the other wrappings. Then the disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. For until then, they still hadn't understood the scriptures that said Jesus must rise from the dead. Then they went home. Oh, it's the best story, and it's true. It touches my heart and moves my spirit every time we study Easter Sunday together. And next time we meet, Peter and Jesus reunite. And oh, what a reunion it's going to be on the beach. What do you say? You and I have breakfast with Jesus next time. Until then, you are loved. Thank you for making time for the Bible for Busy People today. If being part of this community is a blessing to you, it's super easy to share this podcast with someone you love. We're all about spreading the hope of Jesus like butter. So if you've got a moment to write a review, boy, we'd really appreciate that. Maybe you need a little prayer today, or you're ready to take that next step with God. I invite you to check out our show notes. You're going to find lots of encouragement there. This podcast is one branch on a tree called Purposely, a podcast network designed with practical podcasts to help you find and thrive in God's purpose for your life. If you've got a pulse, you've got a purpose.